Welcome to the Healers Podcast, where we inspire and guide healers through business expansion. We give voice to incredibly abundant healers to share their stories. We dive into the quantum field to unlock the energies of conscious creation. We also develop digital tools to help you grow, which you can find on healless.com. I'm your host, Yuli, and I'm grateful you chose to join this space. Now let's go deep. Hello, my dear friends. Today we have a very special guest on our podcast, Roya Darling. She's an incredible healer, energy intuitive, and community builder. She spent years of mentorship with Janet Wright to learn how to heal her own stress and trauma trapped with physical body and energy field. Then she studied under her as an energy practitioner and intuitive. And then she received also a certification in craniosacral balancing. Today, she leads her own successful practice in the Lower Hudson Valley, New York. She does workshops, virtual group business healings, and also hosts incredibly monthly full moon singing circles ceremonies that empower women that I'm personally really looking forward to attending every single month. And the energy there is just incredible. So I'm super excited to have Roya here with us and share some of her magic. There's a lot. And as always, I would love to set my intention for this episode. And my intention today is to inspire healers to show up authentically, no matter what they do and what channel they're on, just always be authentic. And I couldn't imagine a better guest to inspire us to do so. So please welcome Roya.
Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. I am so happy to be here in this conversation with you today. You are one of my favorite people in the Lower Hudson Valley, so I love that we're getting into this space together to talk about what both inspires us.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And speaking of the Lower Hudson Valley and the community you built here, it's really incredible. And I wanted to kind of dive right in. I want to talk about your journey becoming a healer a little later on. But if you can just talk about this tremendous shift that I've witnessed, at least I don't know if I just came to this space recently or it's been happening before, but I do feel like there's this whole movement, right? There's a whole spiritual community that has formed, and you've been such a great leader. Can you talk a little bit how that came about and what is your vision for this community?
Yeah, so it was a few years ago where there were a few women and we went to a ceremony a couple hours north of here, a sweat lodge, and the practitioner, the facilitator, was just singing with us. And it made me realize that I missed singing and I missed having it be integrated into my life more than just, driving in a car, singing to the radio. And there was this idea of, there's so many ancient cultures and practices where we get together as a community and we sing. And in some cultures and in some communities, we've lost that. And there was this real urge and desire to bring that back in as a way of connecting. And so we just started small. There was just a few women. We didn't have songs to sing. So we had to, start asking for other people's input, and we started creating a song list. And it was a real commitment to me. I was like, I want to get to a point where I have songs to sing that I can sing on the fly with other people. And so we just stayed committed, and month after month, more and more women started showing up. And I really think it's because what we're doing is we're tapping into that insight of how disarming it can be when we can drop into our heart and sing together. There's some magic that happens when we feel vulnerable enough to do that with one another. And also, in order to sing, you have to be connecting with your heart. You're connecting with your heart and you're connecting with your voice. And I feel like in this time that we're in right now, women starting to really open up their voice and do it together together in support of one another in this way is bringing a myriad of medicine that I'm seeing start to materialize in people's lives. The people who are showing up to these events, I'm noticing that they're starting to use their voice in a different way.
I mean, this is so brilliant and also so timely, because as you were speaking, I just remember the first time that we met and you mentioned the singer circle. And the first thing that came to my mind, like, oh no, I don't sing in public. Yeah. And then as I said that, my observer voice kind of came and said, well, maybe there's an opportunity there. And it all kind of clicked with me because I'm working on getting my voice out there too. And this podcast is a big part of it. And I'm consciously working on connecting my heart and my throat chakra and really working on opening that, because like you said, a lot of us as women, we've been, silenced for too many and maybe too many generations before us. Right. And the moment you said that, it's literally, that's when it clicked for me. I should do that. This is exactly what I should do. Yeah. Because it's so scary and it's so not me. And it's been such an empowering practice. And I think you tapped into this group vibration that is so brilliant, that it really captures the times of today.
Yes. And I think too, in terms of authentically living, like living from your authentic self, I think for me, when I get into a group environment, and if I'm the facilitator or I'm the guide, one of the things that is important to me is that I don't take myself too seriously. And because I feel like I don't want to be performing. I don't want to be in any way expanding myself so that I'm higher than people. I want to be myself amongst people, and I want to be having fun. And so I think that silliness that I bring to group environments, just it gives permission to other people to be silly as well.
100%. Yes. I love that about you, because I do feel like a lot of people in this field and a lot of spiritual teachers, I mean, there is this kind of, they could be amazing and the wisdom that they project can be incredible, right? But oftentimes it comes with this kind of like cloud of seriousness, right?
Yes.
And like you said, this is like, it should be like a more lighthearted practice, because for many of us, then it becomes too serious and it becomes too heavy and the work is just too much to handle, right?
Absolutely. There's so much seriousness, and there needs to be seriousness with healing, because there's a lot of reflection and reviewing and going inward and contemplating. And so it's so important that we take moments intentionally to dial up the silliness and realize that healing and spirituality and being connected can be light. It doesn't always have to look a certain format. And so that as much as I can inject that kind of playfulness, that silliness, I really try to take those moments, because it's another way to just bring us together as humans.
Absolutely. Talk to me about, when was that moment that you kind of realized that this is the combination for you to bring out to the people? Just coming out with this idea that there has to be this layer of silliness. So this is who I am as Roya. This is how I show up for people. And especially in those full moon circles, like I have to inject that to make people more comfortable.
So I've always been a silly person. My husband and I were jokesters. There's so much joking that happens in this household. And when this actually is helpful in terms of my trajectory, my journey into becoming a practitioner, an energy intuitive, which is, I tried really hard at first to be like one of my teachers. One of my teachers was very clinical and she was excellent at it. And I thought I needed to be like that. I thought that I needed to speak like I was an expert in anatomy and physiology. And what happened was I started really dialing down my mystical side, my energy side, and forcing my voice to be something it wasn't. And I was not bringing playfulness into it. And I wasn't very abundant because of it. I think that, and it was early on, but I realized that there was a moment where I was like, I need to be able to talk about, if I want to talk about angels, or if I want to talk about, frequencies coming through, or if I want to talk about spirit guides, that's what I'm working with in my own individual life. Why would I not talk about it in my sessions? And so when I started actually talking about and owning that, then there was a major shift that happened in my path. And I started to also bring my personality into it, like Roya, and not feel like I needed to be a mold of some type of practitioner. I could just be Roya.
That is so incredible. And this is what I love about you, because it's so authentic, whether like meeting you in person or watching your content on social media. It always feels like you, and it feels very natural and easy. But I love hearing those stories. Like, no, it was actually a journey to get there.
It was a journey. And the social media piece is really interesting too. I've had to push myself. And I feel like some people are going to be listening to this and be able to relate to this, because there's going to be some people who have the urge to be more visible. And they may quiet that because they'll feel like that's ego, or, it's vanity. But there are some people who are meant to be more visible. And if there is an urge to, grab your camera and film yourself and put it on Instagram, it may be because that's part of your path. And I had to push through that, because there were voices that were like, oh, Roya, why are you doing this? And it was hard for me to feel comfortable in front of a camera. But again, I was listening to some impulse that was bigger than me. And I just kept pushing through. And the more I actually got on camera, the more comfortable it was. And it was a learning process.
You're absolutely right. It's such a struggle. And the more I talk to healers, the more of them, kind of the moment I mention Instagram or social media, there's always this kind of like a deep gasp, right? Oh, this is so hard, or this is not for me. I don't have time. I can't, I don't have that confidence to just film myself. How can you give us any specific tips or advice or ideas? How did you overcome that on a practical level?
Yeah, I think to answer that, it really is also to answer how I was able to give myself permission to be a spiritual teacher and a spiritual practitioner, because as much as it was second nature to me to understand spirituality and to understand energy, there was still that voice that, you're full of it. You're full of it, and you're making stuff up, and no one's going to believe you. And I think that voice is something that many people in alternative healing have to confront, because we are in many ways working in the etheric realm that is invisible. So we have to create and cultivate this sense of self-worth and self-belief that what we're doing matters, because it can be so overlooked, and it is oftentimes overlooked by mainstream. So that's one thing, is just to stay with it until you start to really believe that you have this gift to offer. Because for me, I discounted it for so long until I got to a point where I'm like, no, it matters if I show up today. It really does, because maybe I offer an insight or a perspective, or there's a shift that happens that can alter somebody in that moment in a beautiful way. And so it's really starting to connect with the gift that you have to bring to somebody, and really believing it. But also there's the other thing of the self-consciousness about being able to speak about this, because there's a lot of judgment around it. There's a lot of, there's charlatans, or there's people, the person on the side of the road giving palm readings, or, and there's this whole space is very complicated, and we have to start drowning out those voices, because the general person, the general perspective is to believe what you can sense with your five senses, right? And so you have to start drowning out the noise. You have to drown out the feedback so that you can stay true to yourself.
That is incredible. And thank you for breaking it down so clearly. How did you personally kind of overcome those limiting beliefs, and how did you shut down those voices?
So, if I'm totally honest, it's still a work in progress in terms of you're always going to meet somebody who doesn't believe in any of this. So I'm still confronting that within myself. But overall, I've really overcome some big hurdles because I just started really believing that I had a gift to share and that gift mattered. And I remember this pivotal moment where I had had a really busy day and I was exhausted and I needed a healing. I needed to restore my healing. And I kind of laid on my bed and I was like, oh, I wish I could have a session with myself. And that might turn people off when they hear that, but actually it's a really powerful insight because I finally got to a point where I wanted to come see myself. I hadn't up until that point. That's how much I discounted what I had to offer. And when I started really believing it, then other people really started believing it too.
That is such an incredible story. I love it so much. I love it. And actually, one of our previous episodes talked a lot about self-worth. So this is all you just really bringing up like a very important topic among healers. So jumping back to social media, the virtual realm, right? So how does it all translated for you to social media? And you seem, again, so confident and just so natural and authentic in that medium. How did that come about? Was it just kind of like a natural progression for you, or was it more like strategic? Okay, this is what I'm going to talk about on social media. This is what I do on this medium. And like, how did you manage to come up with this presence and so do it so well?
So I think that there's some of us who have the gift of the voice, right? And either we have the gift of sharing energy through our written word or our spoken word. I think I have that gift, right? And it's not always spoken. Oftentimes the strongest energy that I have to offer comes through written words, but there is that impulse to move something through me through the voice, right? And so part of Instagram for me at first, there was no strategy. It was, I want to use it almost as my personal diary, because I have nowhere to capture where my downloads are coming from, what my downloads are, or it was just a real way for me to capture some insights that were coming through. And also to let other people know who may be going through some strange things, as it pertains to energy or as it pertains to this big shift that's taking place, that they're not alone. And then what happened was the more I shared that idea that people were really benefiting from it because they didn't feel alone, that started to really motivate me as well.
That's amazing. And you do get a lot of great engagement on your posts, and that must be very empowering.
What it does is it reminds me that my voice matters, that actually it's tuning out how many likes there are and just realizing if this could help, a few people today for me to share this, then why wouldn't I? And so when there is feedback and there is engagement, it just validates that the words were helpful that day.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Let's talk. I like to keep this podcast and the messages very positive for healers and inspiring, but we do have to talk sometimes about some of the other frequencies, right, that come through social media sometimes. And I personally noticed, and I have a feeling you've dealt with it too, there is this, I don't know what to call it. It's like a virtual attack on the healing community. There's so many impersonators, and I get personally so many requests from those fake accounts or people sending messages, soliciting money. What is this all about? Do you have any theory, and how do you personally deal with that?
Yes, I do have a theory, and I don't want to get too complicated, but I think that there's two types of energy in this reality, right? There's positive energy, which is light, which is source, right? And which is creation and life. And then there's negative energy, which is destructive, which is chaos, which is sabotaging energy, right? So there's creation and there's destruction. And I think that when light comes into a space, there's going to be a reaction from the dark. And so I think that in some ways, what happens is that there are these light workers who come into this heavy space, right? Because social media has a lot of negativity and a lot of darkness simply because a lot of people check out when they go on there. They're not as present. And so that's like a breeding ground for negative energy. And so I think here, these light workers come on to like remind people of consciousness and wake up and remember. And there's just this counterforce that comes to try to keep people asleep.
That is a very deep and makes total sense. And how do you, as a healer, how do you work with that? I don't want to say fight it because it wouldn't be the right approach, right? So how do you work with that?
So that's another work in progress. Sometimes it's interesting, the more when I post about negative energy, like I'll post about negative energy and that's usually when I have to be very cautious about the comments because something is going to try to attack me or go at me or, question my credibility. I've had to go through all of that, especially when I specifically talk about negative energy. And sometimes it really affects me. Like there'll be a comment and I will be really affected by it. And I'll have to clear my energy and I'll have to clear myself and really center myself. But I have to say, it's one of those things that with time, it gets easier and you understand how to stay in your center and you understand how to navigate the response and how to shut it down before it escalates. And it's just practice.
It's amazing. And I love how you combine kind of the energy work with the virtual world. It's really, it's like a whole combination of new skills to put together, right?
Yes.
It's very exciting. So we talked a little bit about your group work, right? And how you're so great in kind of leading those groups and creating those communities. How did that come about? I know you started more as an individual practice, right? And then at some point you realized you have this gift of bringing groups. So can you talk about that expansion process?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I keep following this thread today about impulse, which is it was something within me of this impulse to want to facilitate groups. And it was bigger than me. And I remember I got to a point because I have a lot of one-on-ones, that's the majority of my business. But there were a lot of people within my business that were coming to me and saying, can you think about doing some group work? I would really love for you to do a group session. And I, at the time, was like, I wanted to do that so badly, but there was self-consciousness. What if I say this in front of a big group and it's wrong? Those types of things that you think about. And so what I did was I spent a good couple months praying. And that's usually what I do when I have a block, which is I know that there's something I'm hitting up against that's resisting, that wants to keep me small. And so I pray and I pray to my higher self. I pray to the universe and I say, listen, I really want to accomplish X, Y, and Z. I have a block. Please help me get out of my own way. Please help me get out of my own way, especially when I know it's something that can serve others. And so that's what I did. And then, when you pray or you set an intention like that, you're going to go through a process in order to clear whatever it is that's in your way. And so I did. And when I came out of that process, I was ready. I was ready to start leading groups.
That is so beautiful. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I know that's a very personal subject. And I think the subject of expansion, it's challenging for healers, right? I think we all I don't know one person in the space who doesn't have this purpose or intention to help as many people as possible, right? But at the same time, it comes with this obligation of, okay, then I have to expand myself to facilitate that, right?
Yeah.
So working through that process, and I feel like, you are going through that process. I'm sure it's a continuous, right? It's not just, so is there kind of like the next step that you're working through right now?
So this is also what I would say that I've had to learn, right? Which is especially being an empath and being a highly sensitive person. So it's our gift, but it can be our burden, right? Because if we don't have correct boundaries, if we don't speak up for ourselves, if we don't stop to say, I need to restore and take care of myself, then we deplete and we're running on fumes. And one of the hard parts for me in running my own healing business is that I am not built for this way of doing business that we've been conditioned to do, right? Which is this, always on and always at it and always available. That's not good for me. And I burn out really fast. And I'm also a cyclical person in that I do go through expansion and contraction like most of us do. And they're significant. And so when I go through like my contraction phase, I don't want to see clients sometimes. And so I've had to just really be true to myself and be true to my rhythms and realize that it's going to maybe upset some people who are very used to the way that, everyone does business, which is, you're fully available all the time. And I've had to just be true to myself. And sometimes I'll just like block a week out. If I can, and then sometimes I can't because of what's going on in my life, or I'll block a day out, so that I can, maybe choose the sessions I want to have that week, or just make sure I have enough space to take care of myself.
Yeah, that's, I think, part of being authentic, right? Making sure when you show up, you're truly there.
Yeah.
And speaking of challenges, what is your biggest challenge as a spiritual entrepreneur navigating this business?
So that's one of it, which is this. So again, because I've chosen to take the path of becoming more visible, right? I've had to navigate that because when I make a post, I get so many DMs and I have a very gentle nervous system. And I realize that I get messages from Instagram, from my emails, from text messages, from WhatsApp, and it overwhelms me. That's probably one of the hardest parts of navigating my business is that I get overwhelmed and that it takes me a while to realize that I'm overwhelmed, that I need to adjust something or be okay that I'm not going to be able to get to people. The other thing is that being somebody who wants to stay really connected to spirit and to my purpose and to serving, it can be a really tricky line to walk in terms of how you market yourself and how you talk about yourself in a business sense. Because in my prior life, in this lifetime, I was in branding and marketing. And I got to see the shadow side of that, where you're trying to convince people of things and really almost preying on some of their insecurities in order to try to sell somebody or hook somebody. And I think that I have that still in my awareness, that the shadow side of marketing. And so learning how to market myself or bring awareness to myself in a way that feels respectful to what I'm doing has been tricky. What I've ended up doing is less marketing because of that. And I don't think that is necessarily the answer as well.
I mean, you bring up like one of my favorite subjects, coming from marketing as well. And we both know the shadows, right? And it's something I go back and forth on because we know the shadow marketing works, right?
Yes, exactly.
And this is what powers most of the world. And this is what powers most of the economy.
Right.
It's capitalist society. And you basically taking a stand and saying, I want to do it my way. There is another way.
Yes. And the way that I've switched it in my head so that I could get behind marketing is I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. I don't want someone to have a session with me because I've convinced them of it. I want to bring awareness of what I'm doing to reach people who it could support. But by no means am I trying to convince anybody of anything.
That's very beautiful and brave. Right.
Yes.
And I'm just excited to hear that and also know like that it did bring you abundance despite the fact that you're not using the tools that you know can be very effective and they're the easy ones, and you choose in a way like a harder path, but yet you reach so much success and abundance taking that path.
The one thing I would think about when I reflect on where I've gotten to today, because I do feel like I have a beautiful practice and it feels abundant and it feels like it's continuing to grow, is that I didn't have to overcomplicate it at first, right? I just wrote regular emails. Even my Instagram posts, they're not stylized, they're not branded, they're very simple. And what I really focused on was cultivating my essence, was making sure I was tapping into my essence and getting that out and not getting distracted by the branding of it. Because I think that can also happen within this space of healers, which is we get really sidetracked about what the look and feel of what we're trying to do. And the thing is that people just want to feel your essence. That's what they want to feel more than anything. And so I've gotten to this place without having any sophisticated branding at all. And in fact, I think it's worked for me, in a way, because it's brought people to feel like they can connect with me authentically.
That's beautiful, because I feel like it hits one of the major blocks that people have with social media and self-promotion, right? They feel like they have to have a certain image, and until they have that or they can afford that image, they cannot show up. And you basically coming and saying, like, I'm a marketer. I know how to do those things, and I chose not to do it because I think this way is the most effective.
Yes. And I think that especially in this field that we're in, that really prioritizing your authentic voice and just doing it in the most simple way that feels good for you, get that down and then build from there.
That's a beautiful message. And I think because you mentioned you kind of past life as a marketing and branding expert, can you talk a little bit about the journey of becoming a healer and getting there and getting to this beautiful place that it feels so authentic? I didn't know you back in that life, and I can't even imagine you being anyone else, but I'm sure it was a beautiful journey.
Yeah. So I spent a good deal of my life fairly unconscious. I was very disassociated. I had some early years of trauma. I had some severe, deep wounds that I just didn't want to look at. And I didn't want to, and frankly, I didn't know how to address. And so I learned how to distract and I learned how to escape. And that was how I lived my life. And I didn't pay a lot of attention. And somehow, I still kind of moved around and got to a place where I finished college, which I know that for me, being as disassociated as I was, that wasn't easy. And I got to New York and I got a job. And again, someone who had a lot of PTSD, holding a job was hard because I was prone to depression. It wasn't until I had a divorce at the end of my 20s that was really painful for many reasons, but most importantly because I felt like I didn't know that person. And that's a story I think a lot of people can understand. And for me, it was my opening because it allowed me to see that I could live in a lot of denial. And when I realized how much denial I could live in because I could sugarcoat and I could wear rose-colored glasses to make things that were not okay, I allowed that to humble me, and I allowed that to be the thing, the vehicle that brought me onto a spiritual path, because I was like, I need to start paying more attention. I need to be present. I need to be here. I need to be showing up in my life. I'm not showing up in my life. And so that was when the first person in my life that came in was a clairvoyant. She came in to help heal and help me see things through energy. And that was a language that I understood. I didn't totally understand traditional psychology, even though that's what I studied. And so when I started really understanding energy, something shifted even between me and her, where she no longer was helping me heal. She was teaching me how to be a healer. And it was like my path started shifting in those few years of deep shedding and reorienting myself into a new life.
That is well, thank you for sharing that. That sounds like I'm sure it wasn't an easy journey, but I'm always amazed by stories, how people come to become healers. I think some people are just born into it and they kind of know in the very early days that's what they do. But I do find a lot of people come to it through personal experience and healing themselves, and then realizing that the path is to actually learn through that experience and offer it to others.
Yes.
I think we're just super fortunate to have you here and share those stories. And this is the reason, by the way, I love doing backward interviews, right? It's like only at the end we discover the real story, and it's so fascinating.
I know. I love it too. I love listening to people's why, why they are where they're at and how they got there.
Yeah, because it seems so easy, right? When we started talking about it, of course, this is who you are. This is your online presence. But just to understand, and I'm sure you know that, how different that person who started this path is from the person you are today.
Completely. And, and just one more thing, because I really, really subscribe to this idea that in order to fully heal, and listen, we're all a work in progress. That's part of why we're here in Earth School. We're not fully healed, but in order to really kind of level up on your healing journey, it's so important to offer yourself forgiveness. Because if I didn't offer myself forgiveness, I wouldn't look at myself. I wouldn't examine myself. I wouldn't reflect, because it would be too painful if I was going to be hard on myself. And so I had to learn grace and self-forgiveness so that I could start healing, what happened to me, but also what I did to some other people when I was hurtful or I was toxic. So it's about really just taking full responsibility. That's really what, for me, is getting deeper onto your path.
Well, thank you so much for bringing your most authentic presence into this episode. And I learned so much about you, about your journey, and about how you navigate your presence, whether it's online or as a healer or in those groups. And I think I'm just excited to see you expand or contract.
Exactly.
Part of the journey, right?
Yeah.
And I just cannot wait to see what else you do and how you continue this kind of group practice that's been so beneficial to me personally. So I'm just thankful to have you in my circle, and thank you so much for coming on this podcast to share your wisdom.
Thank you so much. It was so wonderful just staying here and talking with you and sharing, and it was my pleasure.